right, class, today we're going to look at the idea of solving inequalities. Now, if we take a few minutes to get started, we're going to read these pages in our book, and it's going to talk about these different properties that we're going to look at. Now, property of comparison. The idea here is we're just deciding if it's going to be equal to, greater than, or less than. Now, the other properties here have to deal with the properties of equality that we used back in chapter 3. Remember, what I add to one side, I add to the other. What I subtract from one side, I subtract to the other. What I multiply by one side, I by the other. There's just one little property that's a little bit different when we're dealing with inequalities, and that's this last one, transformations that produce an equivalent inequality. You've got to worry about what to do when we multiply or divide by a negative number. When we multiply or divide by a negative number, we have to remember to flip the inequality sign. We've got to remember to flip the inequality sign. And again, the idea there would be this. If I had 1 is less than 3, that's a true statement. If I go through and I multiply both of those by positive 2, if we multiply by 2, we're going to get 2 is greater than 6, and that's still a true statement. But what would happen if instead I decided to go through there and multiply everything by negative 3? If I do that, then I'm going to get negative 3 is less than negative 9. Now the problem with that is that's a false statement. The big fat side is not by the big fat number. So in order to make that true, we have to remember to flip the inequality sign whenever we multiply or divide by a negative number. And you're going to hear me say my byline over and over again is you've got to decide whether to flip or not to flip. That is the question. So let's see if we can apply some of these concepts as we go through and do some problems. Now, once again, we're going to have to solve and graph every equation. So you notice I have an equation and I have a number line. So let's go ahead and look at problem number 1. We're still doing what we did back in chapter 3. We're going to isolate the variable by inverse operations. So if you look here, the first thing I need to do is I need to get rid of the 7. So we divide both, subtract 7 from both sides, and we're going to get 0 is greater than equal to 2k. I still need to divide both sides by 2 to get k alone. So we've got 0 is greater than equal to k. Now remember, for me to graph this correctly, I need the letter in front and the number in back. So I'm going to switch their position, but when I do that, I also have to switch my sign. But now we've got this in the correct form for me to graph it. Remember, Mrs. Burton's going to put 0 smack dab in the middle. Because it's less than or equal to, we're going to put a solid dot. And remember, the tip of my inequality sign is the tip of my arrow. And since it's less than, we're going to the left. Now, let's do the same thing over here with equation number 2. If you notice, once again, we're going to get u by itself. I need to get rid of the floater first. So we're going to subtract 4 from both sides. And so now I have negative 8 is less than negative u over 2. Now, remember, to get rid of that denominator, we've got to multiply both sides by negative 2. Use our inverse operation. Now we're going to get 16, but because we multiplied by that negative number, we've got to remember to flip the inequality sign, all right? And now we have this. Now, once again, in order for me to graph that correctly, I need the letter in front. So when I switch them around to get it to graph correctly, I also have to switch that inequality sign. And so I'm going to go here and put 0. I'm going to go over here and put a 16. And I'm going to put an open dot this time. Did you notice it's just less than? So an open dot. And again, my inequality sign is the tip of my arrow. And it shows me that I'm going to the left. So again, the question to ask yourself to flip or not to flip. On the first equation, we didn't flip the inequality sign, okay, up here to get started because we did not multiply or divide by a negative number. Let's try two more before we work on some homework. If you look at equation number 3, once again, we've got to get C alone. In order for me to get C alone, the first thing I need to do is subtract 12 from both sides. And so now I have negative 3 halves C is greater than equal. Negative 3 and negative 12 is negative 15. Now, to get rid of that fraction in front of C, I've got to multiply by the reciprocal. So what I do to both sides, I do to the other. And again, our reciprocal is going to be negative 2/3. Let's go ahead and put this 15 over 1. Now, did you realize we multiplied by a negative number? So I'm going to flip the inequality sign. We've got a little bit of cross canceling over here we can take care of. 3 goes into 3 once, 3 goes into 15 5, and then negative 5 times negative 2 is positive 10. So when I go to graph that, you notice this time the letter's out in front, so we're good to go. I'm going to put in 0. I'm going to go over here and put in 10. Open dot or closed dot, right? We got a closed dot, and again, I'm going to the left. All right, last equation we need to look at for today. Let's take care of this. Now you notice I've got a lot of parentheses on there. Order of operations says that we need to take care of parentheses first. So let's go ahead and take care of our multiplication. We've got 4t plus 4. Do you see that minus sign there? That means we're going to multiply by negative 3. So we've got negative 3t. Negative 3 times negative 1 is positive 3 is less than 3 minus t. Oh, we've got some like terms that we can put together over here. 4t minus 3t is t. And then 4 and 3 gives me plus 7 is less than 3 minus t. Now again, we're dealing with an inequality, so I'm going to go ahead and put my t's in front because then I've got where it needs to be for me to graph correctly. So we've got 2t plus 7 is less than 3. We're going to subtract 7 from both sides. And so now I've got 2t is less than negative 4. And then if we divide both sides by 2, we've got t is less than negative 2. And I kind of ran over my number line there, but let's go ahead and put 0 here. We'll put negative 2 to the left of 0, open dot, and then our arrow goes to the left. So again, isolate the variable by inverse operations, but the question to ask yourself, to flip or not to flip? That is the question.